Well, hi everyone. Babula and I are back with you again to talk about the new moon in Libra and the many, many ensuing connections, astrological transits and squares and conjunctions and whatever it is, retrogrades, that are going to go on in this month. So take it away, Babula. Where do we start?
Oh, where do we start? It feels like that all year. Like, where do we start? There seems to be a roller coaster of planetary action. So we're here at the new moon again. So the previous 4-week lunar cycle has completed. That was the Virgo cycle, and we're coming into the Libran lunar cycle. So I'll just give people, for those who like these sorts of things, the exact timing. So the new moon is exact on the 17th of October, 5:30 a.m. So that's the moment of the new moon. So again, like the day preceding, the day of, the day after is the dark phase of the moon. And it is very commonly a period where people suddenly just feel like, oh, I feel a bit tired, or everything seems to sort of wind down slow. There is a sense of winding down, actually. It's a good way to put it. Slowing down, we feel perhaps like we want to withdraw a bit more. Circumstances don't always allow that.
Do you feel like a sloth?
You can feel like a sloth.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like that.
Absolutely, absolutely. It's that the dark of the moon, you know, the light of the moon is not available in the night. The night sky is dark, which is gorgeous if we can go out and really experience and enjoy that. And it's the emptying out. Like whenever any planetary cycle comes to an end of its phase, like we're having the big Saturn Pluto cycle completing, and that's a 37-year cycle. This is a 28, 29 day cycle. There is a sense of releasing, emptying out. And it's actually a really good, you know, many ways you can work with this, but one of them is just, what do you need to get rid of right now? And it can be down to really simple things, you know, like it's a time of elimination, of resting, of quiet, of contemplating, of not pushing the river, not trying to force anything to happen. You know, forcing does not work at the dark phase of the moon. And then when the new moon comes in, and by the way, and I'm going to break this down a lot, because there's a lot happening with this new moon. It's at 23 degrees of Libra, and I'll come back to that. It's not like all of a sudden everything just gets moving again. Because the sky is still dark. There's still no moon to be seen in the sky. It takes a couple of days and nights for that very fine slither of silver to begin to be seen, and it's still very small and very delicate. So the cycle hasn't, it's beginning, but it's just like it's so tender, and that's, people often say on the new moon you should be setting new intentions and getting going. No, you really need to wait a day or two, and really just rest, and don't make any big plans. Again, I always modify that with circumstances allowing, you know, like if you're running a business, if you've got a crisis on your hands, if there are health issues, children, you know, life goes on, but we do our best to, you know, work with these cycles. And if you're able to, then you absolutely would take a day or two off here and just be quiet if that's possible. So the new moon at 23 degrees of Libra. So the chart of the new moon is this one's a really powerful one. And I seem to have been saying things like that all year long. But, you know, this is a powerful new moon. I know, because that degree of 23 of Libra is making contact with a lot of other really strong energies in the chart of the moment, in the chart of the moment.
So are you saying we're not going to get that peace and harmony that we would ordinarily get?
With Libra, that's right. That's right. So, you know, well, let's talk about Libra for a minute. That's a really good point. So Libra, as we know, is it's an air sign, so it relates to the mental plane, to human relationships and dynamics. It's kind of the relationship sign. But at the deepest level, Libra is always seeking, through evolution, through the way we evolve and grow and become more conscious, to work on the idea and the principle of harmony in human relationships. We're not seeing a whole lot of that in on the planet right now, but it is a really core fundamental issue in the sign of Libra. How do we harmonize and bring balance and equilibrium and fairness and justice to situations going on in the world that are so fraught now, that are so, it's hard to find language for it even, but it's like we're living in a battleground, you know, there is so much going on. So Libra is that urge for peace. You know, John Lennon, all those songs he wrote and sang, you know, is a Libran. That urge for us to create peace, to sit down with those that we don't agree with and actually have a conversation, and can we listen? You know, we've spoken of these things before, but it's a really core thing. And this is why you'll see Librans working in Aries. They're working in counseling. They're often marriage guidance counselors. They're working in fields where they work with negotiation, where they, you know, sit people down and say, okay, now, how do you see this? How do you see this? Let's have a conversation. How can we find some way to meet? And it's not about giving in. It's about really trying to understand the other point of view. We may not agree with it, but can we at least hear it? You know, or are we just going to go into, you know, big time knee-jerk reaction, which we tend to do that very easily. So it takes a little bit of effort, I think, you know, to stop and go, wait a minute, be really good, because our relationships are at stake. You know, Libra's a sign of relationships. What's going on in our relationships? And if people in a family, in a marriage, in a partnership, in the workspace have very strong different opinions, it can cause a great deal of conflict. And remember, the sign opposite Libra is Aries.
Yeah.
You know, so it's a very dynamic polarity on that cardinal axis. And so that brings us to Aries. This new moon is in opposition to Mars, which is retrograde in Aries.
So this is the but. We've got the new moon.
This is the but.
But
You know, peaceful negotiations, harmonious relationships, peace, balance, justice. But Aries is over here kicking up, you know, and saying, I'm not standing for that. You know, I'm going to do what I'm going to do, and I'm going to push back and argue the point. And it's not that one's right and one's wrong. It's not that at all. We're really trying to hold, like energetically hold, this tremendous polarity and dichotomy and paradox of, you know, fighting for truth and justice. Justice, by the way, is a Libran word. So it's a little bit like the Peaceful Warrior. You know, that amazing book by Dan Millman called The Way of the Peaceful Warrior. I read it years ago. And it reminds me of, in the Chinese philosophical tradition, I'm not talking about modern political China, but the ancient tradition in their martial art forms, Tai Chi and Qigong, the warrior learns to work with energy and disarms his opponent, not with brute force or weapons, although he knows how to use weapons. He knows how to do that, but he uses his body, you know, perfect balance, perfect harmony. And so there's a great deal in this, you know, how can we go into battle if that's what we need to do? And I think that needs to happen on many fronts. But at the same time, one of the ways we do it is working with the law, which is Libra. So there's a lot going on a legal front, I'm noticing, which is, I think, is really an important piece of this.
There is. It's huge what's going on in the background around the world.
Huge. And I mean, in all my years as an astrologer, I've, you know, had clients and students, many of them who've been through their working life involved in the legal system in some shape or form. You know, they always have Libra strong in their chart. You know, these two things just go together, because, you know, in Libra, we're endeavoring to consider both sides of the argument and come to a reasonable, just, fair decision and judgment in the center, you know. but it can get, with the Mars energy, it can get very feisty. You know, so it's a lot for us to hold energetically, you know, the juxtaposition of these two. But that's not all, of course, because here we've got, I'll try and put this in front of the key, we've got those two in opposition, and then down here, both of them are square to Jupiter, Saturn and Pluto in Capricorn.
Those culprits.
Those culprits. So to have the Sun and the Moon square to Jupiter, Saturn and Capricorn and in opposition to Mars, that is a great deal of energy. It's extremely potent. And so this new moon is marking a 4-week period of, I mean, it feels kind of silly to say it because the year's been like that, but it's a reflection of the year of great potency and intensity, and very challenging. And, you know, in the collective field, I mean, we've got, for goodness sake, we've got an election coming up here in Queensland.
I was just going to say that.
Right at the end of the month, and then a few days later, that hugely important election going on in the States.
Yeah.
And I think New Zealand's going to the polls soon too, aren't they?
I'm not sure about New Zealand.
I think they might be. So that's very interesting. And these current elections, I think this has been going on for a while, but they do feel like a battle zone. And, you know, in war and battles, people don't always play nice. You know?
I was just thinking while you were talking that, you know, Libra, people I know who are Librans often have a strong place and often have a problem with making decisions. But at an election, you're forced to make a decision, and you know, it's always the best of a bad bunch, basically.
That's right.
So that's very interesting that that triangulation of those, you know,
that's right,
things are going on. Yeah,
that's right. And you know, Mars in Aries is pretty decisive and goes, I know what I'm doing and I'm doing it this way. But the Libran, you know, are we able to actually take our time? It's like, you know, usually we've already all made up our minds, mostly. Like Libra is also the sign of sitting on the fence.
Yeah.
You know? But usually we've made up our minds and we know how we're going to vote. But I think it does behoove us, and I'm using that word because I love that word. I think it does behoove us, yes, it does behoove us to actually do a little bit of research, like actually have a look. Not that you're always going to get accurate information when you look at people's policies. I mean, that's the other issue.
And not that they'll always be upheld either.
Exactly. Exactly. But, you know, rather than just purely going on superficial personality, like actually take a bit of time to consider and have a look at what they're actually saying. And you're still going blind a little bit, but it is worth, like, if we know who we like and who we don't like, we don't really listen to what the people we don't like are actually saying.
Yes, that's true.
Yes, you just don't. I don't want, you know, I don't want to hear it.
Yes.
So that's an important piece of the Libran story. And so this Libran new moon is sort of setting the scene and the energetic imprint of the 4 weeks to come, but it's connected to this Mars, and it's square to Jupiter and square to Saturn, and it's square to Pluto. So it's intense and it's strong and it's potent. And it will also be putting considerable pressure on just human relationships, friendships, partnerships, and so on.
In communities too, I suppose.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's right. You know, human dynamics are really under a lot of pressure with this. Now, look, here's just a little interesting tidbit. Because there is this group of asteroids. Everyone's heard of asteroids. There's been movies made about asteroids and so on. But it's a huge collection of rocks, basically, that orbit between Mars and Jupiter. And many say that it makes sense that it was originally a planet and it exploded, imploded, shattered. Thousands and thousands and thousands of them vary in size. Since the early 1800s, they started to be discovered because telescopes were strong enough to see them. And they started to name them after goddesses. which is an interesting story in itself. But there are now thousands of them that have names that astrologers often like to just have a little look at the asteroids. Is there anything interesting going on with these asteroids? And it is interesting because on this new moon, right on the sun-moon conjunction, which is the new moon, is the asteroid Victoria. Now, it might have been named after Queen Victoria, or who knows, or whoever discovered it might have a sister called Victoria. You know, they get named in different ways. But that is interesting, given that Victoria is there's so much going on there, you know, and I found that really very interesting.
So going on like what? Going on with Victoria in what way?
Oh, well, with the COVID situation, with the political situation, with what's happening with, you know, laws that are being passed, you know, like day after day after day, and, you know, the extreme measures of control and so on, like more than any other state in Australia. That's what I'm referring to.
Oh, Victoria.
What were you thinking of?
I thought the asteroid was called Victoria.
Well, it is.
But it's Victoria. I get it.
That's right.
There's the connection.
So this is interesting when the way we can work with asteroids. For example, wonderful astrologer called Demetra George, who's done a tremendous amount of work with asteroids and other things. She's quite brilliant. Discovered that earlier in the year there is an asteroid that was traveling with the big Saturn-Pluto conjunction early in the year. You'll never guess what its name was. Its name is Wuhan.
Oh, yeah.
And it was right there. So there's very interesting and often highly amusing connections you can see with these asteroids. So I just threw that little bit in.
Just to confuse me.
Yes, please, ask the question.
It's so easy at the moment with Mercury retrograde.
Yes, we'll get to him too.
Yes.
Yeah, so I just thought that was kind of really interesting. There are other asteroids, but I won't go into all of that. But I just thought that was kind of very interesting, that and see what it might show up as. Like, you know, it's not really about trying to figure out what it means. Like for me, it would be more, I'm going to be paying attention around that new moon to see if there's anything. I mean, there's a lot going on down there on a daily basis, but the fact that this new moon is so potent with Mars and the Capricorn planets, is there something even extra significant that's going to be taking place on this new moon with that asteroid named Victoria right on the new moon? You know? It's a kind of a curiosity, you know.
Interesting.
Yeah. So yes, dear Mercury is retrograde, as we know, and he has been for a few days. It was on the 13th, I think, that he turned retrograde at 10 degrees of Scorpio. So all through 2019 and 2020, the retrograde Mercury phases have all taken place in water signs, and they don't always do that. And the water signs are not high energy signs, and, you know, Pisces, Cancer, Scorpio. They take us deep into feelings, emotions, our psyche, the unconscious. We will often feel more tired. Mercury retrograde in Scorpio, it can suddenly just feel like, oh my God, I feel like I'm trying to, you know, tread through treacle, and, you know, there's not a lot of energy. So absolutely, you know, rest is recommended when that's possible. You know, you put that together with this new moon phase, with the dark of the moon, and Mercury's retrograde in Scorpio. So it's sort of stationary, going backwards now in the deep, deep, deep waters of Scorpio. That's not going to be for most people a time of, you know, high energy. So, you know, it's really wise to not push it.
Yes, yeah. And I've noticed too that while there is a lot going on in the background, like we mentioned before, about calls for commissions and inquiries into the media and doctors trying to speak out about the truth, and it's like a lot's happened at the grassroots level. Yes. And now that energy is sort of depleted a bit, even though there's some protests going on still. But at that other level, the energy's shifted to that level.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right, because the people are being constrained and it's not so easy to go out. It can still happen in some ways in some places, but absolutely. So behind the scenes, people are working and coming together in coalitions around the planet, you know, medical people, scientists, lawyers who are not part of the, you know, system so much, and working. And I think that's a really wise way to move. But to get them to this point now, of course, lots has gone on behind the scenes.
Yes, yes. And what I was saying in relation to where the energy shifted, it's like the grassroots level, they've exhausted themselves.
Yes. It's
feeling.
exhausting. It's been an exhausting year.
Yes, yes. So through all the emotional turmoil and the changes and the stress, and they've just, and the you know, many people feeling like they're the lone wolf in the wilderness, saying, look at this, you know, all that sort of stuff. This is wrong. This is whatever. And now there's a sense of at that grassroots level that those who had been speaking out all along about this doesn't sound right, there's something going on here beyond what we think we know, they've been validated in a lot of ways.
That's right.
Yeah. So, but that's been exhausting. So there's that.
That's right.
That's
right. And I think during this, you know, Mercury is always retrograde for, say, 21 days, give or take a day or two. It's a 3-week period, happens 3 times a year. And just for us all in general, the recommendation is always, you know, back up all your files. Mercury retrograde often costs us money because equipment and machinery and computers crash, break down, the washing machine breaks down. You know, it's very common that something breaks down, you know, and it costs you an arm and a leg to fix it or replace it. You know, that's a common occurrence. And you know, miscommunications, of course, and most people will have heard of these things, but it's very true. Miscommunications happen, you know, double check appointments, back up all your files. If you have to meet someone somewhere, double check that you've got the right date and time. You know, how many times that, you know, during Mercury retrograde, do people turn up on the wrong day, at the wrong location, at the wrong cafe, at the wrong meeting? You know, they get the Skype time wrong, you know, all of that. There's confusion about time zones, like things get confused and mixed up.
Yeah.
So Mercury is notorious for creating a bit of mayhem in that way. But if we know it's happening, it's very wise to sort of laugh and brush it off. Oh, that's right, Mercury is retrograde. But so it can be kind of annoying in that way. It's like the pesky, annoying little Mercury, but it's brilliant for research, for deep work, for deep therapeutic, psychological work. In fact, I've just connected. I've signed up for a 7-week online writing course, and it's not like teaching you how to write. It's actually using a very specific method to use writing as a tool for consciousness and discovery, you know. And I watched this guy in a video, and I thought and he took us through an exercise, and I was really inspired and impressed. And I thought, that feels absolutely perfect for me right now. And Mercury, you know, Mercury rules writing, and fine-tuning and honing right in on an issue and really slicing through it, you know, and writing and being really honest with yourself. And that feels so appropriate while Mercury's retrograde.
Yeah, interesting.
You know, things like that.
Yeah, and I was just doing a bit of research of my own recently, and Mercury was heralded as one of the gods who would, as a psychopomp.
Exactly.
Who would ensure that the souls of the dead got to where they had to go. And it's almost like there's been so many things die off this year, you know. Right. It's like, well, we must make sure that now this is dead, it just goes where it needs to go, out of the where it is now, and get rid of it.
That's right. And he was quite special in that way, you know, this fleet of foot youthful figure with wings on his feet and wings on his helmet, could zoom in and out of all the different dimensions, you know, Mount Olympus and the heavens, and down to earth to people, and scoot down into the underworld by tricking the triple-headed dog at the entrance. He'd just trick him and just down he'd go, because he had messages to pass on.
Yes.
But there are always important messages when Mercury goes retrograde, both in the public sphere. There'll be announcements. Feels like it's been a year of announcements, but announcements, messages, the media is Mercury.
Well, it's certainly the death of the media.
Oh my God, that's right. And in Scorpio, you know, as Mercury goes back to go deeper, he's doing it in Scorpio, the deepest energy of all the zodiac. You know, Scorpio is the sign of depth. Down you go beneath the surface to see what's really going on in the shadows. That's what Scorpio is actually about. And Mercury retrograding in Scorpio, it's going to go deep, and it can bring up. Then when Hermes Mercury scoots back up into the upper world, he's got some information, you know, that was lurking down there in the shadows. So that's a kind of an analogy that we can use to, you know, get a bit of a sense of Mercury retrograding in Scorpio. So it can be really deep, and that can be tiring, and, you know, we're all a bit exhausted already. And so I do encourage people to rest, to meditate, to, you know, like, you know, it's those indulgent things, like in the middle of the day, go and lie down in your bed and read a nice book, like nothing serious or heavy, like a nice novel or something, you know, for an hour or two, and have a snooze. Like Mercury's retrograding in Scorpio, dark of the moon. You know, if we can just be a bit kind to ourselves, because we live in a world that tells us we should just keep going.
Yes, yeah, that's true.
And it goes against all of the natural rhythms of life. You know, we're so disconnected from the natural.
Yes, we're always told to soldier on, aren't we?
Soldier on, keep going. You can do it.
Yes, yeah.
And sometimes we have to, because circumstances demand that for a period of time, but then we try and get back to a more natural sort of rhythm, and rest is a part of that.
Yes.
So there's one more piece about this Mercury retrograde.
Well, I hope so, because I'm just exhausted listening to it.
I know. This is a very interesting piece, because at the retrograde, and still now, it's in opposition to Uranus. Now that's super interesting, because, and one of the things that means is that there's going to be, I can actually give people dates for anybody who's interested in things like that.
Please do.
The first opposition before Mercury turned retrograde was in opposition to Uranus on October the 8th. Will be in opposition to Uranus, now retrograde, on October the 20th. And then Mercury turns direct again, and the third opposition to Uranus will be on November the 17th. Now that is super interesting, because when a planet turns retrograde, it's really significant if it's making a strong aspect to a strong planet, because that will also flavor that period of time of that retrograde phase. And so for Mercury, like, it's easy to think that Mercury is a bit insignificant, because he's just this little planet whizzing around, you know, he seems kind of a bit lightweight. No, he has a lot to do with human affairs and life.
Yeah.
And in many ways, he's like got many, many hats. Uranus is like a higher octave of Mercury. If Mercury is mind, information, messages, words, communication, ideas, Uranus is all of that on a big level, on more of a cosmic level. It's like Uranus sort of plugs us into the cosmic mind, if you like. Big ideas. And Uranus is also the planet of revolution, upheaval, chaos, change. This is a very, it's sort of adding to the feeling of chaos, of disruption, of instability. Mercury making 3 oppositions to Uranus over a period of, it's about 5 or 6 weeks. Normally we just get 1 and move on, but because of the retrograde, there's 3. And these two have a very powerful connection. They kind of represent very similar things, but Uranus is like a powerhouse of consciousness. And so one of the other things we can expect, as if it hasn't been happening all year, but really is strong now, is sudden reversals of opinions and ideas and revelations and shocks.
Yes.
You know, Uranus is the airwaves and shocks, and, you know, like an earthquake suddenly happens and it's a shock because suddenly in a moment everything's changed. Crash. You know, like, be very aware and conscious when you're out on the roads, you know, because in like that crash, there can be a crash. So a piece of information or a message that out of the blue changes everything, you know, that kind of thing. So it's a kind of high voltage energy, this one.
Yeah.
And it's sort of and it's very crazy that these important elections are taking place during Mercury retrograde in opposition to Uranus. It just adds to the whole theme of it's anybody's guess.
Yes. Yeah.
Polls, forget them.
Yeah.
Chuck them out the window. They're completely, well, we know that now anyway from recent years. Throw them out the window. They seem completely pointless. Anything can happen here. And not only that, in terms of outcomes, there'll be all sorts of upset and drama around, you know, claims and counterclaims of fraud and votes getting lost in the mail and systems breaking down, systems crashing, all kinds of shenanigans going on. It's going to be a bit crazy.
It just feels like we've just been seeing that all year anyway, but now our perspective about it is changing.
Yes.
We've got months of knowledge and whistleblowing under our belt now.
That's right.
And I think that people are starting to get a feel for what's garbage, what's a lie, and what the reality might actually be.
That's right.
At least a degree of that.
A degree of that, because there's so much we don't know.
Yes.
And there's so much more to be uncovered. And,
yes.
And it can't all happen at once, you know. So yeah, it's huge and highly significant. And it's interesting that, you know, we know the big players that are the statement for the year, but then throughout the year there are all these other, they're not minor, but they're more sort of fast moving shifts and movements of the planets that often act as activators, triggers. You know, to these big story going on in the background for the whole year, and then these other energies come in and kick that off and trigger that and activate that. Bang. So I think, you know, we can expect some more sort of shocking revelations and information coming to the light, and counterclaims and counterclaims, and, you know, all of that.
Yeah. And I've noticed that the focus has shifted. While there's still a concern about businesses with the borders closed and what the future might be in regard to the economy, but right now the focus is more on what you're saying about claims, counterclaims, falsifications, you know, lies, deceit, corruption, that sort of thing, all coming to the surface. And so there's been that shift again in this space between, you know, and it's going to be different again after December.
That's exactly right, and it feels as though everything's had to be this extreme in order for all of this stuff to be exposed. That's been going on for such a long time. You know, it's had to be, as hard as it is, and that's certainly true for some people, not everyone to the same extent, but it's like it's had to be this challenging and this extreme to jolt us out of our complacency, you know, go, wait a minute, what's actually going on here?
Yeah.
And, you know, and it keeps raising more questions, doesn't it? So
yeah, and people have been, you know, they've been quietly educating themselves in the background, you know, about a whole lot of things. And I was very impressed by someone who was speaking the other day about, you know, earlier this year, or when protesting started, that people were just being taken away. You know, they're being arrested and dragged off. But now, as they're being dragged off, they're quoting bylaws.
That's right.
and all those sorts of things, you know,
common law and these
common,
things.
yeah, and they've educated themselves, and I think
Right.
that is really good that that's happened.
This is really fantastic. I completely agree with you, because our education system has become over the decades just more and more woefully inadequate. Like, we are not educated on how these things work. We don't know our rights. We don't know the laws. They keep changing the laws daily, but and regulations and so on. But I think we're deliberately kept misinformed about this stuff. And, you know, like, it should be just standard throughout, you know, education years, that we learn this stuff every single year so that we know how things work.
Yeah.
Because we don't, by and large. And it takes a huge amount of time and effort and research and study to take the trouble to do it. But you're absolutely right. I completely agree. People are learning and realizing that we need to know this stuff.
Yeah, exactly. It's like we haven't wanted to be bothered with it before, but now it's the, you know, it's the line in the sand, you know. This is, we need to know this stuff now for our survival, so that we can, and our rights. Yeah.
That's right. And this is an important part of Saturn. And I did a workshop on the weekend about, you know, a review for 2020. And just to really look again at the whole story astrologically. And I did a big focus on Saturn, because I've started to really see that Saturn's like so important in this whole piece. And there's many things to say about Saturn, but one of the things is it is about growing up, taking stock and taking responsibility. We need to take responsibility, you know, and I mean that in many different ways, and kind of own it, and educate ourselves and get clear and know what's what and know what our rights are and so on, because, you know, by and large we're pretty ignorant, and that gives us strength, you know, to do that individually and collectively. So that's a really, really important point. And it's like someone said, I heard this somewhere a few weeks ago, someone said, it's time Australia grew up.
Yeah.
And it's true, you know, we need to grow up.
We've
just been, you know, living the good life for so long, and you just, you know, complain about the politicians, but, oh, well, that's just what they do. And what can you do anyway? Well, no, we need to get actively involved here now and really participate. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah, so it's good. It's really good. It's very good, actually, because we can't move forward into a new age, which is what's actually happening, without this process taking place. And it's painful and it's hard and it's tough and it's shocking and it's outrageous. Has to happen.
Yeah.
You know? And that's for all of us. You know, if we all look at our lives, we've all been through periods like dark nights of the soul, calamities, crisis. But if we're sincere about wanting to grow and evolve, then those periods are the periods where we grow the most. You know, and if you look back, you can see those times. We've all been through them. And, you know, looking back, you actually appreciate them and kind of bow down to them, because without them, we wouldn't be what we are now.
It's sort of like, you know, we have to grow and evolve, not just spiritually in that Neptunian sort of way, but also in that practical Capricorn way. You know, it's like putting your beliefs into action.
That's right.
And walking the talk.
Exactly. And in a very real, human, embodied way.
Yeah.
Yes, we all come from the stars and we are all cosmic beings of light. Absolutely. I have no question about that. But right now we're in a human body on this earth, you know, trying to deal with all this stuff. And that's the Capricorn, you know, Capricorn. Yes, in many ways it sort of represents the patriarchal structures that have outlived their time and so on, and become rigid, so rigid and controlling. But that doesn't mean there's a problem with the sign of Capricorn. Capricorn is actually a yin feminine sign of the earth, and it gives us form and structure. And if we're in alignment with a higher consciousness and with earth, Gaia and nature, and that we are absolutely in tune with Capricorn in the most beneficial of ways, so that we can organize ourselves on this planet in a way that's of benefit to everybody, and in a way that's mature and grown up and responsible, you know, and not give our power away to other people who then just take it and do what they like with it, which is what's happened. And we've let them.
Yes, yeah. And on that point with Capricorn and being a female earth sign, you know, I've seen there's been a switch again back to environmental concerns.
That's right.
So, yeah, it's not just about living on the planet, it's about how we inhabit the planet.
Exactly, and live with her.
Live with it, yeah.
That's right. And there's a great deal of work to be done there too. But I've noticed that too. It's sort of, it's like it got put on the back burner there for a while because there were so many critical things front and center. But I am seeing that. Yeah, yeah, because it's such an important piece of this.
So what other surprises do we
have? What
have?
other tidbits do we have going on? So, yeah. So, I mean, that they are on this new moon. The really big key things is that strong new moon story I talked about with that big T square, and also Mercury retrograde opposite Uranus. So if I just run down some movements of planets over the next sort of couple of weeks in this first part of the cycle till the full moon and a bit after that. So let me see. So, okay, here's an interesting one. On the 21st of October, the black moon Lilith, which is an energy that I really like to work with and feel a real sort of connection with, she's been in Aries for 9 months. And the black moon Lilith represents a very potent feminine energy, and it's to do with our experience of the rejection, violation of, domination of, demonization of the feminine principle as expressed as women. Nature herself, we call nature she's Mother Nature, Mother Earth, Gaia, Pachamama, and the dark indigenous peoples of the earth, the black races, the indigenous races who are very much deeply connected to her, being completely, you know, dominated by, and I'll use the phrase white male supremacy, basically. That's pretty much puts it in a nutshell, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And so Lilith is a mythic figure that represents the sort of takeover of human life on this planet by these masculine forces. But it's distorted masculine. You know, it's absolutely distorted. It's a masculine energy that seeks to dominate through brute force, basically.
Yeah.
It's not the real masculine, it's very distorted. And so many men have suffered under this, you know, regime of masculine dominance that's been going on for some thousands of years. So the black moon sort of addresses our own personal experiences of how that's played out, you know, through the different signs. You can sort of look at how that's been in operation in that person's life. But in the collective, while she's been going through Aries, there's been this, like the Black Lives Matter movement has really kicked in during this period. So the feminine takes on this feisty, fiery, combative Aries energy. It's like the divine feminine goddess. She picks up her sword, you know, so she becomes Kali, Durga, you know, all of the traditions that have one aspect of the feminine that's fiery and feisty and will go into battle and lop off heads, you know. But she's about to leave Aries and go into Taurus, and she'll be in Taurus for 9 months, and that takes place, as I said, on the 21st. And so that's a real shift of energy. So Taurus, the energy slows right down. The fire is more subdued. It's an earth energy, and it's a sign of tremendous stability. Ideally, with Uranus in Taurus these days, it's not so stable. So Taurus is also a money sign, you know. So very often when women in particular have the black moon Lilith in Taurus, what they've often experienced is challenges around money and ownership of property and financial independence because they're a woman. See, so it's always that, like, for a woman, the position of the black moon in her chart, the story is about, because she's a woman, she's experienced this in that area. You know, it wasn't that long ago that a woman with a very secure, high-paying job could not get a loan from the bank to buy a house if she wasn't married. I mean, what the hell's that about? You know? And yet she could easily afford to buy one and pay one off. So, you know, things like that. So how through monetary systems, the feminine principle and everything that's contained in that has been disadvantaged and dominated and controlled. So, but it's also the earth herself, Gaia herself, Pachamama herself. So I think we're going to see some interesting new movements begin to, like powerful movements, begin to really arise through both men and women who feel deeply aligned with the feminine, because many men do, you know, and the earth, and to really start to get really strong about this. And because when we begin to heal these wounds around the black moon, she actually becomes a source of tremendous strength and power, because the feminine principle is incredibly powerful. But we've kind of lost our sort of confidence around that and belief in ourselves around that. And so that's going to be an interesting shift. And so I'm going to be paying close attention over those couple of days just to see what I'm noticing energetically, what I'm feeling, and what I'm seeing around me, you know, as she moves out of Aries and goes into Taurus. So we're going to see things come up around, you know, money and finances and the land and food production and sustainability. These are all Taurian themes. You know, look, you know, Taurians, they're often working in some kind of financial system or the banking system, you know, in whatever capacity they do, or they're interested in the metaphysics of money, or they're very much interested in growing things. They're farmers. They have a gorgeous garden. You know, I see that all the time. They have to plant things, grow things, trees, food. You know, you walk in and their garden's just luscious, like you've walked into a paradise, you know, that sort of thing. So the earth and the land, issues around land rights for the indigenous people, you know, the land itself, and our disconnection from the land and from the earth. That's really important. So that they're going to be themes that will start to show up from. So I like to watch on the day, you know, and around those couple of days, and just tune in and see what I'm experiencing and what I'm observing. And then on the 23rd, 2 days later, the sun leaves Libra, goes into Scorpio. So this time every year, from around the 21st or so of October to around the 21st of November, the sun moves through Scorpio. And so we take a deep dive. And that, again, is often a time when people's energies drop because it's so deep. You know, we don't have a lot of energy to, you know, be super active because the energy is taking us in. We're doing a lot of deep internal work. Psychic work, psychological work, clearing out stuff from the unconscious, processing a lot of feelings and emotions. Strong dreams might happen. Our psychic energies can really open quite powerfully. We might notice we're feeling particularly intuitive if we're paying attention. But it can be intense. It's quite intense, because Scorpio's job, if you like, is to take us down into the shadowlands. Now, some people are wired up to go, yeah, let's go.
Yeah.
And other people go, no way, I'm not going down there, you know?
Yes. Well, that's where I like to frolic.
Me too. I'm one of those also. You know, let's have a little dig down there. We need, you know, something important down there. We need to see and discover and meet and experience, and then perhaps bring it up into the light. So that's what Scorpio is all about. And people do have quite a strong reaction to the sign of Scorpio. There are those like me who have the deepest respect for this sign. I know a lot of amazing Scorpio people. And then there are many people who are just like, keep them away from me, you know, because it can be a little scary. It's a powerful sign. You know, themes around, like at its most negative, and we always have to look at that with every sign, but at its most negative, Scorpio can be pretty full on. And at its absolute worst, it can be utterly controlling, manipulative, abusive, you know, that dark, yucky stuff lurking in the shadows. You know, like that is Scorpio, like the yuck, you know, picking up that rock and looking at the slime and the muck that's underneath it.
So would that be where, like, you might find a narcissist or someone like that?
It could be. That's it, particularly if they're very, very controlling.
Okay, yeah.
It's like that, you know, it can get extremely dark and abusive in Scorpio. And I understand why some people just go, I know a few Scorpios are not, you know.
So would you think we might see a bit more domestic violence then?
Possibly, because it gets intense and it can get explosive. You know, it's ruled by Pluto, the lord of the underworld. It can be explosive and eruptive. And so if people are, and a lot of people are feeling a great deal of pressure and stress, particularly people in some really difficult circumstances. And I'm thinking a lot of people in Melbourne and so on. It's like a pressure cooker. And for those of you who have a pressure cooker or have a mother or a grandmother with a pressure cooker, you know, it's all this energy is building up inside, and you have to have a release valve.
Yeah, yeah.
If you don't have a release valve, the thing will explode.
Yeah. And that's, sorry.
No.
I was going to say that's probably why we're seeing more suicides, things like that.
That's right.
Yeah.
And so it's really like, it's a hugely important part of the Scorpio process to not sit on it, because there's a tendency to hold it all inside with Scorpio. And sooner or later, something's going to give like a volcano. And there'll be an explosion of either rage and violence, or just, now an explosion of rage and fury is fine if you are fully present and you're not causing any harm to anybody. Like if you're just in a process and you need to just let it all out, that is really helpful, actually.
Yeah.
But if you're actually exploding all over somebody and causing harm, even emotionally and verbally, or physically, even worse, then that's not good. So that can absolutely happen. It's like we need to have release valves, and we need to understand what our release valves are. And if we're feeling immense pressure, if we're under tremendous pressure and stress and it's not letting up, sometimes the tiniest thing can just trigger a big reaction.
Yes. Yep.
You know? So it's really important to know what healthy release valves are for you, you know, and remember Mercury's retrograding in Scorpio. It will slip back into Libra for a while. Mercury, but most of the time it'll be retrograding in Scorpio. So as the sun goes into Scorpio too, we've got all this Pluto energy going on. So and of course in the public arena, you know, with politicians battling it out, it can get ugly and really dirty. But it can also be a time when some real truths can be exposed, and quite ugly truths might get exposed, you know?
Yeah.
So, you know, Scorpio, I can talk for days about Scorpio. It's such an interesting sign. But in my experience, I've never yet met, and I've met many people who are therapists, counselors, healers, psychiatrists, you know, people who work deeply with other people. Always you will see strong Scorpio energy in their chart, because that's the territory. So during that phase, we get to do really deep inner processing and purging and releasing of old, stale, toxic material. You know? So we have to use intense language talking about that, but that's the nature of the sign.
Yeah.
So this happens every year. This time of year, the sun goes into Scorpio and down we go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then we come up for Christmas.
and then we come, exactly right. And then around the 21st, 22nd of November, the sun, having done that dive, like the sun has gone down into the underworld, into the darkness, we leap out into Sagittarius, and Sag is the exact opposite energy. It's like, whoa, party time.
Yeah.
You know, tremendous. Well, you'd know all about that.
I do. Being a Sag, I love Christmas and I love all of December.
It's all about celebration and enjoyment and getting out and about, you know, and let's pray that humanity and everyone around the world can actually do that, you know, and not all shut up and locked up.
Well, I think there's still going to be a lot of people won't be able to visit their relatives in other states. That's probably going to go on for a while.
It looks like it. I think that's the intention. In certain areas, for sure.
Yeah.
Now, around the
oh, there's more.
well, just to sort of, I just wanted to come into early November because that's the US election, and whatever our opinions are about the states, the candidates, the fact remains that what happens politically in America is important to the whole world. We all know that. I think we all recognize that. And so again, Mercury is retrograde during the election. But Mercury stations and starts to turn direct on the 4th. So pretty much at the US election, Mercury is stationary, changing direction. So that's really very interesting. And like, if political leaders hide the services of an astrologer, they would never choose to have an election during Mercury retrograde, but it happens very, 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 very often. It's uncanny how often it happens. It just, you know, mayhem ensues.
That trickster energy.
A trickster energy. You know, anything can happen.
So maybe next time we get together, you can give us a heads up on how it's looking for Donald Trump.
Well, I have had a bit of a look, and I can't remember a lot of it, but I'll be keeping an eye on it. And what I would say, and I won't at all presume to predict, because I think it's unpredictable. Given many factors, it's unpredictable. And, you know, some astrologers will get it right and many won't. But, you know, if you get it right, is it a fluke, or was it, you know, was it like a foolproof method? And there are methods for sure. But what I will say, Donald Trump has a number of really powerful transits of destiny. That's what I would say. And we will have a look at next time, if you like, just a quick look. And and that doesn't mean that he will win or lose, you know, it could go either way, but whatever it is, when I saw that, I went, it will be exactly as it's meant to be.
Yeah.
Those transits are so, like, far stronger than Joe Biden's. And I don't know whether, you know, that's positive or negative, but and who's going to win, but very powerful transits for Donald Trump, a number of really powerful destiny type of transits.
So it's up for grabs.
It is. And, you know, and it's going to be pretty intense on the way to the election date.
Yeah. As if it isn't already.
As if it isn't already.
But it's building up.
And just looking ahead, in the middle of November, Mars will turn direct again. So, you know, that will change things. And then we know in December there's going to be some really big shifts with Saturn and Jupiter finally coming out of Capricorn. So we're certainly not out of the woods, but there are signs of change coming up over the next couple of months.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
It's been a big year, hasn't it? It's just
massive year.
Astrologically, all the things that we've talked about about what's been going on, it's when you think back about it, it's huge.
It's really huge. And I think, you know, apart from the actual circumstances of what's happening, I think for each individual, for each one of us, we're all meeting our own sort of Waterloo and issues and confronting our own sense of, well, where am I at in my life, and who am I, and why am I here, and what am I doing, and am I living my purpose, and if not, why not, and what does that even mean and look like? And you know, we're all like really looking deeply at a lot of those really important issues. Like, it's a year for that individually and for the collective, and for all the systems and structures on this planet, including all the structures of our own life. Like, how have we set up our own life? What is the structure of our own life about, and how is that changing? You know, what needs to change? What are we feeling like? Did we come into this year with a feeling of, or at the end of last year, was there a feeling of, I can't keep going on like this, something needs to change?
Yeah. And what is it that really makes me happy?
That's right.
What is happiness? How does that look to me?
That's right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Something need to radically change there, and that's right.
Yeah.
Or even small things change can make a huge difference.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I always find, you know, when I'm trying to make sure that I'm doing what I feel I should be doing and what makes me happy, I always use death as a touchstone and say, well, if I had a week to live, what would I really be wanting to do? And I think that's always really helpful.
Me too. I agree.
Yeah.
Or if you're sitting on your deathbed and look back at your life, would you feel like fulfilled, like, yeah, I did it. You know, I didn't leave anything out, you know, that sort of feeling. I didn't avoid this, or, oh God, I wished I'd, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel exactly the same. I think it's a great touchstone.
Yeah, it is.
And I think we're kind of facing that now, aren't we? You know, like, what's the worst that could happen here? That's a question I often ask. What is the worst that can happen here? Like, really look at what is the very worst thing that could happen. Can I deal with that? Can I face that?
Yeah.
And usually it's, you know what, actually I can.
Yeah.
I may not want it, I may not like it, but actually I can.
I can deal with it. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, phew. Well, thank you once again.
A pleasure. I hope that's helpful for people.
Yes, thanks for all your wonderful, helpful insights, in astrological insights. And I think what you do is you help to highlight things for people, because I think that, you know, people can deal with anything if they can understand it. You know, and I think that astrology is really helpful. So I know people watching this will be people who are interested in astrology. So,
Right.
So yes, we hope that was helpful to you.
Fantastic. And I think the big transits of 2020 show that there was a kind of an inevitability to all of this playing out. It was just going to happen.
Yes, yeah. Now, I believe you're going to do an online workshop soon, are you?
I am. Gosh, I forget the date. It's in a few weeks' time, about 3 weeks, I think. And I'm going to focus on the planet Saturn himself. It's just a 2-hour session, but within the context of 2020, but to really look at Saturn and in a way that I hope is helpful for people to even perhaps understand more about the Saturn in their own birth chart. Like, where was Saturn when you were born? And is Saturn an important planet in your birth chart? And because I'm going to speak quite a lot about the mythology of Saturn, which is very revealing. And I think it really helps us to understand what this important planet's all about, and all the different facets of him, and how he operates, and what his purpose is, you know. And yes, so I'll be doing that in a few weeks.
So people can, I'll put down here in the description, I'll put your website and how they can.
It won't be on the website, because I'm getting a new one done, but they can contact me through my email address or through Facebook.
Oh, I'll put that down there again. Okay.
Okay, thanks.
Terrific. Okay. All right. Well, thanks so much again. And
pleasure.
Thanks for joining us, everyone. And we'll be back soon with the next astrological insights, the next lunar phase, and sharing that with you. So bye for now.
Thanks. Bye, everyone.
Bye.